illegitimate area of research. It's an incredibly important area of research. And, if it comes up with totally blank slate, then fine, but it's still important. Okay, now we come to another one, and this is I mentioned this is the more religious type of answer, called the devil theory. And many people in the world, Catholic, Christians, Anglicans, some Cathars especially, neo-Gnostics, also a lot of Muslims, some Jews, not many I think, they do believe in an actual devil. There is actually a bad guy in history. They don't know who or what the devil is, but he's in the scriptures. He's definitely got a plot line. Zoroastrians believe in him too. They call him Ahriman or Angra Mainyu. And even Buddhists believe in him. He's called Mara, and he is the power of death. He tries to stop Buddha getting enlightenment. And so, okay, are we up against Mara here? Is there some devil force at work? Well, I leave that hanging there. You can read my speculations about this. I wrote a whole book about this called, I appealed for comparative diabology as a new academic discipline. I gave a lecture at the University of Oxford a few years back, and the University of London at Birkbeck College, where I used to teach. I gave a two-part lecture, which is recorded online on my website. And I published a book about this, comparative diabology. And I'm the first guy actually on the planet, as far as I can find, who said we need a study comparatively of the devil in all these different traditions. What is the devil's role in history according to Judaism or Zoroastrianism or Buddhism or Hinduism? Because there's devils in Hinduism as well. Or in the other traditions. And how do we defeat them? This devil, very important in Christianity. Christianity says Christ was defeating the devil through the resurrection, through Easter, through the crucifixion. I'd like to hope that's true. And that's why Easter is so important to Christians. We're coming up to celebrate it. Yeah, but, to a secular non-Christian, they laugh at that. They say, yeah, you think you defeated the devil, but sorry, mate, I've got news for you. He's still around and in charge. The devil lot seem to be winning in some ways. And then if you watch scary videos by people connected to the Q movement, they say, no, the devil's absolutely in charge. He's running satanic groups that have taken over Hollywood, that have taken over child trafficking, that run paedophile networks around the planet. The devil is absolutely in charge. And all the elites are sworn to worship Lucifer. And so this Christian thing, it's a joke for them. That's absurd. Well, I don't want to go down that scary rabbit hole. I hope that's not true. I like Tom Hanks. I hope he's not a paedophile Satanist. I sincerely hope that, these good people are not. But I do think there's some questions to ask. And one doesn't have to be okay, so it was Aristotle who said, it's a mark of an educated mind to entertain a hypothesis without giving assent to it. So I'm not saying, by looking at the study of comparative diabology, I'm not saying we have to agree there is a devil or not. I'm saying we have to suspend judgment and entertain the hypothesis and then examine the evidence and the facts. I'm reading a very important book by Norman Cohn, who was Professor of Intellectual History at the University of Sussex. And I grew up in Brighton, so, I keep coming back to Sussex. And he wrote a very important book called The Pursuit of the Millennium, where he analyses the history of this apocalyptic story in Judaism, Islam, Christianity, and Egyptian religion, as well as Zoroastrianism. And he looks at this devil image that keeps coming up. It's only one of the features he's looking at in that amazing book, which I'm reading at the moment again. For instance, in Egyptian religion, the Hermetic tradition, there was Seth. Seth is the devil for them. And he's not a very pleasant guy. Seth, I don't like Seth at all. He comes and he seduces Isis when Osiris is away in India. He kills Osiris, chops him up into pieces. And to me, that's what the devil does, Seth. I think there's a link between Seth and Satan. I mean, the Hebrew traditions borrowed a lot from Egypt, and I think, Seth and Satan are sort of the same story, really. Osiris represents the forces of goodness and truth and justice and judgment and magic and love with Isis. He then is resurrected, and he has a son with Isis, miraculously, called Horus. And Horus comes back and avenges his father, Osiris, by killing Seth, eventually, according to some of the narratives. And so, we need Horus to appear and defeat Seth all over again. What is Seth's big thing? Well, he uses chaos. Absolute chaos and fear. We're living through a Seth time. The devil theory is that Seth is trying to take back the world from Osiris and Isis and cause fear and panic in people. And, it's kind of looking that way, I would say. Well, this is where Horus comes in. I'm on the Horus team, along with my spiritual cohorts and friends and all the millions of people that meditated the other day for this magical thing that's going on in the heavens. We're coming up to a magical full moon. I mean, anyone that's aware of the beauty of life will not want to spread fear, chaos, hatred, and so on, and death. We're trying to spread love, harmony, blissed out beauty, and also intellectual beauty. That was the point of Plato. Beauty is wonderful of form, but the beauty of the intellect is what is the Osiris work as well. Osiris is now the Lord of the Dead. He rules the afterlife. So when you die, you go to judgment to Osiris, because the battle between Seth and Osiris is interworld. It's interplanetary as well as interworld. And I believe the forces of love and peace are stronger, but we do have a fight on our hands, is what I would say. That's why I've written this book of peace magic. It's the first time anyone in the history of humanity, I don't know where everyone is, why is everyone asleep, has done a history of a manual of peace magic. I'm coining the term peace magicians, because we need to get active, folks, because the war magicians are sure as hell active. So that book is very much an Osirian offering with Isis's blessings to train a whole bunch of us for the next 100 years so that we can hold the line as peace magicians against these forces of darkness. Do I believe in Seth as an actual force? No, I'm saying that these ancient archetypal myths tell stories about the psychology of us humans. We all have a Seth in us. We all have a Osiris in us. And it's very important that the Osiris wins. And I'm a great fan of Zosimus, the great alchemist, who was a hermeticist and the founder of alchemy that influenced Jung. And I would say with Zosimus, we need to ensure the good guys win by doing our bit and by finding them within ourselves. Okay, then I come to hypothesis 6b, which is, it's an update of the devil theory. It's what I call the modern devil theory. The old-fashioned devil theory is about, the devils with pitchforks and all that. This is now the modern devil theory, which is, no, big science, big brother, 5G. This is the 5G theory, which is the nasty, telecom people that are sticking up 5G antennae everywhere. They're partly responsible for Wuhan because that was the first city to switch on. It's shot the immune system of the people of Wuhan and millions have died, and then they took their infected bodies around the planet and it spread. And it spread to other types of places where 5G is being rolled out. You can find lots of evidence for this theory if you look on the internet, and I've been researching it this last week. It's become a hot potato because if you mention this on BBC, you get ticked off by Ofcom because they say this is a conspiracy theory. Well, again, I demand the right to ask awkward questions about conspiracies that are going on, because it seems to me that 5G, as far as I can tell from the research I've looked at, and I've done quite a lot of probing, has never been proven to be safe. Now, some people say, well, okay, but it's not been proven to be unsafe. Well, I'm not so sure about that. Some cities have banned it, and more cities are beginning to ban it. Even mayors in France and Italy have the power to ban this thing, and they're doing so. As an eco-philosopher, okay, so I follow what's called the precautionary principle, which Professor Singer and Skolimowski and all the other founders, Murray Bookchin of green philosophy, have argued since the 60s, you know, Rachel Carson. We shouldn't bring in new scientific technologies until they've been proven rigorously to be safe. You know, this has been found by trial and error since the 60s, since the advent of this incredible technological revolution, that you shouldn't bring in things like fertilizers or additives into food or new types of medicines until you really test for their biological, medical and ecological impact. You know, look at what's happened to the bees and so on. The impact of new technology on the environment it's been found by philosophers that we have to operate what's called the precautionary principle. So we don't introduce new technological developments until they're proven 100% to be safe. And that has not been done with 5G. It's as simple as that. I don't care whether it's whatever you say, until it's proven, then we shouldn't be rolling it out. And switching it on in Wuhan, if that's what happened, I'm assuming that's true, it was a catastrophe. Well, it might be a total coincidence that that's the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak, or it might not be. I don't know. I have the right to ask and to find out. And I would ask my colleagues in Wuhan at the Institute of Technology to please email me with any evidence they have either for or against the hypothesis that 5G activation had something to do with the outbreak. And I hope you're free to do that, because I've noticed that in the last week, since this theory began to be excited and talked about, an awful lot of YouTube videos appear with China's obviously doing a massive offensive to say 5G is safe, and it's showing how 5G has helped medical fight back against coronavirus. I mean, that's blatant propaganda, it's so obvious you can see it. No, I'm interested in the actual facts, not the propagandistic stuff. And what I want to see is properly researched, evidenced proofs for the safety of 5G. Only at that point will I, if ever, conceivably support it. All the evidence I've seen is the opposite. So as an eco-philosopher, I have a duty to blow this whistle. And, that's what I'm doing. Because it's very important. And we need to slow down this huge... I mean, it's really commercial capitalism that is driving this technological... Got to have the new gizmo, got to have 5G, because then I can watch more movies simultaneously, and I can use the phone to do everything, drive my car, and I can have smart cars. And no, that is the devil talking. Rudolf Steiner said that's Lucifer, that's the sneaky devil that wants everything quick and robotic, but doesn't have a soul. That's the Lucifer temptation, according to Rudolf Steiner, who had some good ideas. I used to be the librarian at Steiner House in London, so I've researched his thought in detail. Don't accept all of it, but some of it's good. Okay. Then there's another development on modern devil theory. 6C. This is a new one, but it's still out there, and it's a theory. And this is connected with the arrest of Dr. Charles Lieber, who was the head of the bioengineering and chemistry lab in Harvard. And he actually, historically, this is factual, he was arrested, and he's currently on bail in America. He will be tried once the courts get functioning. And it seems that he was sharing some research with Chinese academics, strangely enough, at the Institute of Technology in Wuhan. Weird that, isn't it? And that his research is on bioengineering viruses with robotic, like micro nanotechnological things that can go into the viruses. Well, that's odd. More will come out at the trial if we ever get there. But he's accused of lying, and he was given bail of $1 million by the judge in Boston. I know Harvard. I've been there. I love Harvard. I'm shocked to think that anyone as a professor at Harvard would be colluding with Chinese academics and giving away research. He was getting grants from the Department of Defense in America because his research has military implications, right? And so he's getting millions from the Department of Defense in America, and at the same time was getting $50,000 a month, I believe, and that's the figure, from China. That's two timing, I mean, and that shows you the problem with our slant in academia. I bet the professor of classics or the professor of Buddhism at Harvard doesn't get offered money like that. The professor standing up for Dharma, no, you have to be inventing nanotechnological robots that can activate viruses and go get the enemy. I mean, what a weird world we're living in. So Dr. Charles Lieber's and the nanotechnology of viruses, there's a whole school of people out there researching this. That's modern devil theory 6C. I suspend judgment on this. I'm not saying whether or not his research may have had any direct implications with the outbreak of coronavirus. What I am saying, however, is that it's indicative of a trend among a certain type of scientist to share research which has military implications, to accept money from the military-industrial, complex, to make these secret weapons, and then to sell them to the highest bidder, which is what he was doing in effect. Well, I think that there's so many wrong things about that I sincerely hope he tells the truth in court and is then duly punished and sacked from Harvard. And that I don't think that kind of research should be going on in universities anywhere in the world. I don't think that... You see, this is the argument I had with Professor Lawrence Freedman at the University of London when I was setting up an Institute of Peace Studies at the University of London. Lawrence said to me, "Oh, Thomas, you're wasting your time. Peace studies doesn't exist. There's no such thing as peace. Get real, mate. Study war. I study war. That's real." Now, that was his argument, and I totally and utterly disagree, Lawrence, if you're watching this. Look at the world that way of thinking brings into being. It brings into the chaos of a Seth-run universe. And you really need to, convert to peace studies, please. I know it's a bit late, but it's not too late, totally. Lawrence is a member of the Privy Council, so he has a lot of clout, and I'd love him to come out publicly and say, "No, that Thomas Stafford was right, I'm sorry." That'd be lovely. Because my argument is that universities shouldn't be doing military research for, aggressive, covert war fighting and so on, especially making weapons of mass destruction in secret. And, yes, we need obviously a defence capability in Britain and other countries. I'm not saying shut down all defence institutes. I'm saying for every one there should be another one as well funded for peace. Because, and this is the point I made with Lawrence, is what I'm trying to do is to create the thing which your defence thing is supposed to be defending. Why do we have wars? To protect the peace. Why do we have defence? To protect the peace. Well, what is the peace we're trying to protect? That's why we need peace studies, is to find out what it is we're all fighting to protect. So that's the argument, and I think that the Charles Liebers of this world really should be downgraded, and they're running the show in academia, not just at Harvard, but at London and Cambridge and wherever you look, Well, that's not the kind of world I think that I'm particularly happy about, and I think that world has led to a situation whereby, yeah, I mean, whether or not coronavirus is directly being bioengineered, as this hypothesis argues, is irrelevant. It's part of a system of knowledge that is possible. And that mere possibility is what is terrifying people, which we need to be free from. So what I'm arguing is that scientific researchers should have to swear an oath of, like a Hippocratic oath. They will never misuse their knowledge for weapons of mass destruction, invention and so on. So the Charles Liebers of this world simply won't be allowed to operate. We won't have any doubts what they're doing because they will have sworn that oath. And by the way, if they break it, then they're stripped of all their degrees, they're thrown out of academia forever and a day, and they have to sweep the streets. Okay, so now we come to the next hypothesis. We're going nearly at the end. And we come to number 7, which is what I call the God theory. We've had the devil theory. This is now the God theory, and it is Palm Sunday. It is, coming up to Easter. It's God's time. Well, the God theory argues that actually God's in charge of history, not the devil. God gives the devil a little role, but actually God's ultimately in charge. So God must have done this to us as humanity through either bats or either coronavirus engineers or whatever, to test us in some way. This is our modern Job experience. And if you read Job, as I've done, Job is all the terrors of hell are unleashed on him in order to prove his faith. So this is our Job moment as a planet. I noticed that the very orthodox community in Israel has been, put under lockdown because they're, coronavirus outbreaks. I mean, it's not sparing Israel here. If Israel is God's chosen nation, well, unfortunately, it's not. God seems to be a bit, he's being universal in his application. It's even hit Amazon indigenous tribal peoples now. So anyway, the God theory says that whatever your actual theological position, Hindu, Jewish, Islamic, New Age, Confucian, whatever, since they all believe that God is wisdom, we've caused this because we've neglected wisdom. And the solution, therefore, is to turn back to wisdom as a humanity. We've created this tragedy for ourselves by doing the wrong kind of research, the wrong thinking, by having political economic systems that don't have ethical foundations, by doing animal eating of, not checking on proper diets, not having vegetarianism and kosher foods as a moral duty, and not telling the truth, by having Charles Lieber type people that just, live for profit and don't care about the ethics of what they're doing. We have politicians like Boris Johnson and the Brexit nutters all just lying through their teeth and getting away with it. We have media barons lying, just out of sheer, evil, I suppose. So all this is anti-wisdom, and so this is the blowback from God. If you can't mock, I mean, it says in the good book, you can't mock God. In the end, you get the comeuppance, you get the karma. So this is the God theory. This is the accumulated ignorance. So all the ignorances I've looked at in my study, the accumulated ignorances of mankind now have culminated in this coronavirus thing. I quite like that God theory because, as you know, I'm ultimately a believer in the divine intelligence behind history, and in love and in goodness. The word God is related to the word good. It's the joined upness which brings together everything in being. That's what God literally means, the word. And we all like togetherness. It means to gather. These words are all from Anglo-Saxon. Gut. And it means when you come together in love and friendship. That's the God energy. And we've been neglecting that and abusing it. We've not been coming together. We've been doing racism and nationalism and religionism and classism all the rest of it. We've been breaking stuff up. Now that's the Seth journey. That's the cutting things up into pieces. I'm on the God team saying, let's gather again, share and pool our resources for the common good, and we will defeat this coronavirus. And we will not only defeat it, but we will defeat all the things that are led to it, all the ignorance. And that's the power of truth and goodness, okay? So anyway, that's my rundown, that's my weekly update with a few additions of what I've been doing this week. And truth to me is the absolute thing to take away from this, because truth in politics is what will get us through this. I'm calling for the duty of veracity bill. People can take that voluntarily. There's a website for that. I'm calling for truth in academia, which is, again, the Charles Lieber types. They get away with literally murder. And no, we need people to take an oath of veracity in academia, because I don't want to live in a world where academics don't tell the truth unless they're taken to court, you know, where truth becomes a thing that's only ever heard on the floor of the courts. That's ridiculous, folks. Come on. We need truth to be spoken in science and by scientists, researchers around the world in their labs, and they should take an oath of veracity as part of their Hippocratic oath for science. As I've said before, my late colleague Professor Sir Tom Kibble, who was head of science, head of physics at Imperial College, London, where they've done some of the modelling for this tragic disease. Kibble worked with me on a kind of network of scientists around the planet, and he actually took my name for it. It's called Scientists and Engineers for Global Responsibility, which is the name that I gave him from Philosophers of Peace and Global Responsibility. And what they have campaigned for is a code of ethics for scientists, and this is so overdue, it's like ridiculous, you know. Please, people, just get with the project here, and the Royal Academy and other equivalent bodies around the world to the Royal Academy should be promoting this, in my opinion, as a matter of absolute priority. Nobody should be allowed to call themselves a scientist who hasn't taken the Hippocratic Oath. Let's call it the Pythagorean Oath, I don't care, you know. Call it the Newtonian Oath. He's a respected scientist. They have to swear to work for the benefit of human beings, using their knowledge for peace, for the advancement of society, the advancement of the well-being and happiness of people. That's the point of science. That's why Francis Bacon, Descartes and other thinkers thought up science. It wasn't to give jobs to people inventing weapons of mass destruction. It wasn't to give, you know, like Mengele, the horrible scientist at Auschwitz who operated doing experiments on prisoners, you know, and that's science? No, of course it's not. That's nescience. That's what that is. And my friend, Professor Cedric Smith, who appointed me to my post, one of the team, along with, many others, he knew Verschuer, who'd been the head of genetics for the Nazis, who was Mengele's line manager. And that's why he filled me with absolute conviction that I had to, work to get scientists around the world to take an oath of ethics, unlike Verschuer and Mengele, who did the opposite. They thought experimenting on Jewish prisoners is fine, and Slavs and homosexuals and whoever else. No, it's not. There is such a thing as ethics, as Kant had pointed out, who I learned from Stefan Korner, the great Kantian philosopher who taught me when I was 19. So truth is the way to go, folks. And I'm going to come to the end now. I want to, just talking about truth, I want to go back to Dharma, which is the Buddhist term for truth. The first really, strong, deep religious urge I got was to, when I discovered the Buddhist approach to Dharma, I thought, this is so deep. Why aren't we talking about this in schools and academia? And like Schumacher, I realised that Western philosophy is a bit threadbare. We should learn from Buddhism. And I'm only going to quote one thing. I'm doing a commentary on the Dhammapada at the moment. I'm going to share one verse only from chapter 19, which is called the Dharma, the truth, or righteousness. It's from verse 270. A man is not a great man because he is a warrior and kills other men, but because he hurts not any living being. He is in truth called a great person. I mean, that one little verse is the quintessence of my argument for peace studies instead of war studies, you know. Greatness does not come from plotting to kill or harm. It comes from the opposite, plotting to bring peace to other people and to yourself and to society in general. And we need academic institutions and centres that are doing that work. That's the conspiracy we ought to be involved in here. Because the other lot are sure doing their conspiracies of the Seth variety. So that quote from Buddha, which I love, brings me to my Christian quotes from the day, because Christ was very much, I think, in that stream of energy. And as I've said before, I think the evidence is that he probably studied at Takshila, according to Holger Kirsten's marvellous book, The Original Jesus. And I think he came back speaking a very pure form of Dharmic wisdom, which not all the Gospels fully got, not all the writers got, not all the early apostles got. Some thought he was a sort of conquering Messiah come back to lead a terrorist army against Rome, you know, etc., etc. But I think the real disciples got it. One of them, I think, was Matthew. I quite like Matthew. I think he was a clever guy. And in my commentary on the Gospel of Matthew, I've discovered a lot of secrets. He actually, it's thought, spent time in Edessa. And there is a school of thought that says the Gospel of Matthew was written there, which is Sanliurfa. It's in Turkey, where Abraham actually came from. And most scholars didn't realise this. They thought Mesopotamia was where Abraham came from. No, he came from southern Turkey, Sanliurfa or Edessa, and Matthew went there. Anyway, Matthew, great man. He's the guy with the Magi coming to visit baby Jesus, and again showing indications of the East. Why do the Magi know where to go? Well, maybe they came from Takshila. You know, I'd love to talk to Matthew about all this. Anyway, so he gives the Sermon on the Mount, as it's called, which is like Christ's version of the Dhammapada. And each verse is just really deep. I'll spare you the deep, long commentary. You can listen to it on the Green University website, where I've done the entire Gospel of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Thomas, and Mary Magdalene as a thing you can listen to at your own time. But very, very briefly, starts with, blessed or happy are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Well, happy, makarios, are those who are humble. Poor in spirit means to be humble, not arrogant. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That means they are in the know of the cosmic eternal now that is all around us. As Saint-Simon, the philosopher, Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, the unknown philosopher, and William Blake, and all the other romantic visionaries realised, Shelley and co, is the kingdom of God is amongst us all the time. It's eternity now, if you want. But you don't realise that unless you're humble enough to say, every child knows this, but we older people forget, especially when we're arrogant. And the other thing, the kingdom of heaven is the joined upness of everything. You know, the kingdom of heaven is God's country, and that's where theology used to be called the queen of the sciences, because everything has a theological dimension, because everything is God's energy and manifestation. Even mathematics, look at Plato and the tradition of sacred mathematics.